Hi guys, it's Finn here from the Reverse Product team, and today I'm going to give you a how-to guide on installing our new Chain Tensioner Expert. There are a couple of new features on the Chain Tensioner Expert. We have a limit stopper, a locking screw, an anti-slip washer behind the fixing bolt, and an adjustable barrel to get the chain line just right, as well as a higher preload on this spring. So it's very simple tool-wise. All you need to install the chain tensioner is a split link tool for putting your chain, something to hold the chain to check, but this is not a crucial point, and then a 3 and a 6mm Allen key and a torque wrench to make sure that the fixing screw and the locking bolts are set to the correct torque. Just like with the regular derailleur, the limit stopper should rest against the tooth on the dropout, and when you're screwing the tensioner on, for now, you don't want it to be fully tight. We just want it to be pinched up so that we can check the chain line and set that correctly. Now with the tensioner in place, we're going to set the chain line. And the important thing here is to make sure that the sprocket and the top pulley of the tensioner are perfectly in line. As you can see at the moment, the two are not in line and the chain will not pass freely between the two. Simply loosen off the limit bolt on the barrel and you can slide the tensioner back and forth into the correct position to have the cog and the pulley nicely in line with each other. As you can see now, the two are in line with each other and the chain will pass smoothly between. Now to set the distance between the sprocket and the top pulley of the tensioner, the important thing to note here is that there is between a 1 and 3mm gap between the pulley and the sprocket. Any more than this and you might experience chain slip due to the lack of chain wrap around the sprocket. So please ensure that, I repeat, it's a 1 to 3mm gap. And before you tighten up the tensioner, make sure that the limit stopper is sumped out against the dropout. Now that the limit stopper is down against the dropout, the Chain Tensioner Expert's new locking bracket needs to be tightened to make sure that it can never shift, even under the heaviest conditions. Just simply do this bolt up to 3 Newton meters, and the tensioner will be locked in place. Now that the chain line and the limit stopper have been set, it's time to put the correct Newton meterage onto the fixing screw. This is a super important step because if there is not enough tension on this bolt, you'll find that the tensioner can slip under full compression of the suspension. So please ensure that this bolt is mounted all the way up to the correct 28 Newton meters of force. Now to refit the chain, compatibility wise, there are multiple chains that will fit. Anything from a 12 to a 9-speed chain or a Z1 Narrow will work, but we would recommend a 10 or 11-speed chain as these are nice and lightweight but won't break the bank. When fitting your chain, the important thing to focus on here is getting the correct chain length. This is crucial for the performance of the tensioner, and there are 2 things to pay attention to. Firstly, the neutral position, and secondly, the end position. Firstly, the neutral position, you need to make sure that the stopper and the cage has between a 10 and a 15mm gap. And then secondly, you need to make sure that in the end position, it is not hitting into the bump stop again and there is still free movement in the tensioner. In most cases, you're going to be removing links from the chain when fitting a tensioner, but a good way to get a gauge for the length before you commit to taking any links out is to use a chain hook. A old spoke or a zip tie will also do the job. And you can see in this case that with the chain at the correct length, we are too far away from the stopper with the cage, so we need to add a couple links to this chain. Once your chain is set to the correct length, fit it back together, and now we're ready to do a final test to make sure that everything is as it should be. Now, a final check to make sure that everything is set up as it should be. If you have an air shock, you can just simply take all of the air out of the shock, or if you have a coil, remove the coil. We can put the bike on the floor, cycle it through full compression of the suspension, just to make sure that the tensioner is not stopping out in the end position. Now, with the bike on the floor, you can cycle it through full travel and make sure that the tensioner is not hitting the stopper in the end position. You can see in this case we've got plenty of additional chain, so this is set up just fine. I think in general with small travel bikes you're not really going to have much of a problem with this, and in 4-bar bikes it's definitely worth looking at, but when it comes to high pivot bikes and bikes with a very rearward axle path, then this is a really crucial step to make sure that it's set to the correct length and the chain isn't too short. as if the chain is too short, under full travel you could risk damaging the tensioner or your dropout or snapping the chain. Thank you very much guys. That's all for installing an expert chain tensioner. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments and we'll be happy to help. Happy shredding.